History is about telling stories. Art history is about telling stories through things we can see, through visuals, through visual materials. The history of Asian art, well, I guess you already know the definition of it, but to tell the story of Asian art is extremely hard. Why? Well, let me give you an example. It's much harder than other history. Well, first of all, this is the old textbook that we used. Asian art. This is the old textbook that we use. And the table of contents, it's structured as this. Part 1, we talk about South and Southeast Asia from early civilization all the way to modern contemporary art, right? From a linear timeline, South and Southeastern Asia. And then part 2, we talk about China, which is in the main part of the Eurasia continent. And then again, for China, from the very early of time to later modernization and contemporary time. And then part 3, it talks about the Korea and Japan, which is another main part, which is East Asia, another main part of Asian, what we call the Asian history. So from early to now, right? So separate it in different parts and then talk about those different parts from early time to later time. This is the new textbook that we are using. It kind of talks about similar things, but the structure is different now because it talks about the art before history as a whole, all the areas. Find examples from all areas: South Asia, Southeast Asia, East Asia, all of those. And then it starts to talk about China, South Asia from early time, East Asia from early time, and then back to South Asia, Southeast Asia, to East Asia. So it's gradually following the timeline from early to now to present, but it's changing places, right? It's traveling through places chapter by chapter. So in a bigger framework, it's following that timeline, one straightforward timeline, but the places changes all the time, back and forth. Back and forth. I mean, let me show you a map. I mean, from South Asia to China, East Asia, and then back to South Asia, East Asia, and then sometimes we talk about Southeast Asia, and then through this constantly changing places, we arrived from the early civilizations to today, to the present time. And my question for you is, what would be your way of telling the story of Asian art history? Can you recommend, suggest, or think of any creative or effective way of telling that story about Asia? Because the difficulty is that they all look so different, right? Just from the outset, it looks very different. Like South Asia doesn't seem to have much connection with the mainland. I'm talking about the mainland of the Eurasia continent. This main part of it. How do this area, so mainly we're separating the Asia into 4 parts. South Asia, right here, the mainland right here, Southeast Asia right here, we see a lot of water, covering by a lot of water, so the maritime, so might be pretty vibrant, the maritime trade route here. And then the East Asia as the fourth part. And then how do these four parts connect with each other? Or how can we use one story, just one narrative, to connect all four of them together? Can I challenge you to think of one method for me? Because I've been debating, right? Even just between the old textbook and the new textbook, I've been debating how I can tell this Asian art history better. Because this new textbook that we are using, as it's going back and forth, South Asia, East Asia, it can seem daunting and confusing to me, even to me as the instructor. So here I offer maybe one expedient device for you to make sense of the structure of our new textbook, so that you don't get lost so easily in our course of Asian art. That is, the very vaguely general structure of our textbook, of our modules, they're formulated by the spread, or we use the word dissemination of religion. And you're going to run into that word many times in our course. Dissemination of religion, of this, of that, of this and that. Because that's how, the dissemination of things. That's how different cultures, different regions connected, right? The spread of Buddhism, for example, from South Asia to mainland China, and then across the peninsula to the Korea and Japan. That's one way of traveling, and that's one way that this book is telling the story. Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism traveled across the sea to Southeast Asia. Right, that's another way. That's one way of telling the story in this textbook. So mainly following the path, how religions travels, spreads, disseminates. And that forms the structure, the framework of our textbook of Asian art.